To start the second Mishnah.
Yep.
So this is Daf Lamed Amud Beis, Maseches Beitza. Excuse me. Okay, who would like to start the Mishnah?
Ein Neuchlin Eitzim in a sukkah.
Okay.
Ela min a schach. In a samechlo. You cannot take wood from a sukkah.
Okay, and even though it doesn't say that we're talking about Yom Tov, I suppose we're talking about Yom Tov because the whole Masechta is really dealing with what we are and aren't allowed to do on Yom Tov, so let's assume we're talking about Yom Tov. So what would you think it's saying?
One is not allowed to take wood from a sukkah.
Why? What would you think is the reason?
Jeans for mitzvah.
Because it's been designated for a mitzvah?
Because they're for sukkah.
So that should be a Maseches Sukkah, not necessarily a Maseches Yom Tov. Beitza is nicknamed Maseches Yom Tov. We have to find a reason that would be a Yom Tov reason, ostensibly.
Sukkah means like anything that's covered, right? Doesn't mean sukkah.
Let's assume right now it means a regular sukkah, but maybe you're right. Maybe it's a structure that looks like a sukkah.
Yeah, you can't take schach or wood from the sukkah to burn it. Or whatever you say.
What's wrong? Well, why not?
Because it's, I would think, I don't know, but I think it would probably be designated it's kadosh.
That's what it's really said.
Yeah.
Because it's been designated for the mitzvah.
Okay.
So if we're talking on Pesach or Shavuos, the regular Yomim Tovim, or Shmini Atzeres, maybe also is then it would be mutter.
No.
Basruli was saying that maybe any structure is called a sukkah. So what does it have to do with the mitzvah?
What's smach there? I mean, it's something next to the sukkah. The building next to the sukkah.
That's a bit cryptic as well. What does it mean next to the sukkah?
Other wood.
Other wood.
Yeah.
Okay, so in your explanation, what is the Mishnah telling us?
That you're not to take wood from the sukkah for purposes other than covering the sukkah, but from the structure next to it you can take the wood to burn for chonefesh, to make a meal.
And the prohibition of taking from a sukkah, according to you, still you're trying to say it has only to do with the mitzvah?
I think so.
So this is only applicable to the sukkah, the Yom Tov of Sukkos.
Unless
But all the other Yomim Tovim this wouldn't be applicable to.
unless you consider it a place of storage.
What is a place of storage?
The stuff on a sukkah, it's there for a long time, something you normally wouldn't take off. Right? It's like a mufta. You don't go
It's like
there
an
often.
otzar, you're
It's
saying?
an otzar, yeah.
Like a storage, maybe you stored it there.
The purpose for the
So
wood
the problem is a problem of muksa.
yeah,
So this is going like Rabbi Yehuda,
it's going up Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah.
and samachlo is mutter because
Because it's not a storage place.
so the
It's just
sukkah
wood.
is a storage place and next to it is not a storage place. That's what you're learning?
I think so. I mean, the purpose for the wood on the sukkah there's a reason for it. It's not meant to burn. Whereas the wood next door is something that you can burn.
Okay.
It's useful to burn.
Possibly. Let's see Rashi. Who's reading Rashi?
Rashi or to the Rashi?
At Muktzah Yom Tov.
Sorry? What would you say now?
At Moktzeh.
At Motzeh? Where are you reading from?
Oh, sorry. It was so
You're reading Tosfos.
Right.
That's very ambitious of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well I remember that next time we have a Tosfos to read that you're very anxious to read it.
So the Mishnah says, "Ein notlin eitzim min sukkah." Kevon, for example, the Pesach or the Atzeres.
Okay, so this is Rashi saying this because what? What do you think Rashi's saying? Why is he saying this on Pesach?
For that very reason that it was wood out of place. It wasn't meant for using on Pesach or Atzeres. It wasn't meant for burning to make food.
Okay.
So it's a place of storage. I'll go back on that, I think. HaYeshiva Sukkah.
So he's there.
HaYeshiva Sukkah Beganei.
No.
Begana?
Gina.
Begina. And you would sit in the sukkah in the garden, or the pardes, or the orchard. Ein notlim eitzim min ha-sukkah. Ele min ha-someh. And you can take it from a place next to the sukkah, but not from the sukkah itself. If he's sitting in a garden, or if he's sitting in the sukkah, or if he's sitting in an orchard.
So these are places where you want to sit outside and enjoy yourself.
And there's wood there.
You need a structure to sit in. You're sitting in a structure. The structure you're sitting in is called a sukkah.
Right.
It does not have to do anything to do with the mitzvah of sukkah right now. Sounds like what Sruli was saying before, that any structure is called a sukkah.
Okay.
It's just a sort of a transient structure that may not be there permanently, but it's outside in the garden, in the orchard. Sort of give yourself an outside opportunity to sit outside, but be somewhat protected. So this sounds like it doesn't have anything to do with the mitzvah of sukkah, just the structure that's sukkah-like.
Right, okay.
And Rashi says it's talking about Pesach or Shavuos. Atzeres means Shavuos. Perhaps if it was Sukkos, then there would be no Kiddush. Like you were saying, it's a holy structure. It's a problem with the holiness of the sukkah, or maybe the fact that it's set aside for the mitzvah. We're saying now, even on Pesach and Shavuos, when it's not set aside for the mitzvah, you still shouldn't take wood from it. Okay, why? Hashta.
Hashta, now, at this stage, no hashta.
Mashma.
Sorry. Mashma, im he of shina, no, tenim. Of root. That's what that means. No hashta. No hashta.
No. That was from the previous sentence where we said you're not supposed to take from the eitzim of the sukkah elamina samuchla.
Okay.
There, Rashi just quoted.
It's next to it.
The Rashi seems to be indicating that now, meaning in the Havamina of the Gemora, we think one thing, and it's implied that later we'll say a bit of a different pshat. Now we're thinking one thing, later we'll probably change the pshat. But what are we thinking now? Hashta mashma, now it's understood, meaning now the Havamina of the Gemora is what? That is talking about im, who, av, which means what? Im,
if
he
or he
is Av.
so it's of Malacha?
No, how's that spelled?
With an Aleph.
Av.
I don't know what Aleph is.
Av is like when we say thick.
Thick.
So if it's thick,
Which is, how would it be thick? Rashi gives the idea of how it could be thick.
Chinatano, Canis,
No, that's a mem, Sophie.
Canim. Chinatano, Canim, Arba.
Stop there. Those three words, let's try to get a handle on those.
That it is given Arba many something. Canim, I don't know what
Shroy, do you have any idea what a kaneh is?
A reed.
A reed.
A reed, is it? Okay.
Rosh nachnu kanim. Rosh
She-
nasnu.
Right.
Place.
Actually, place on many reeds.
As Rashi's saying, we're thinking that we're talking about a very thick covering. How could you have a thick covering? You placed on it many
Layers.
reeds. So you have the minimal amount, and you have the more supplementary amount that's on top of that.
Right.
So Rashi says,
Mutter little behind. So it's permissible to take from it.
from those reeds, from them, from those reeds. So Rashi's explaining which part of the Mishnah now? There's like a ratio and a sefer in this Mishnah.
The ratio.
The ratio is where it says you can't
Right,
take. But Rashi just said mutter.
right.
So is he explaining the ratio or the sefer?
He's
Yeah.
explaining the ratio.
The ratio is where you can't take. So how could Rashi say mutter?
Because this is not samuch, this is on the skull.
Just a second. I'm trying to show you that it can't be talking about the ratio, because the ratio is where things are forbidden.
Right,
It's usher to take eitzim from the sukkah. So how could Rashi say mutter? You're patently ignoring that word mutter. Let's take that as being the indication of which part of the Mishnah we're talking about.
So it must be the second part.
Right, he's talking about the seifa, the part that's samach to the sukkah. And if you look back a few words in Rashi, that's what he was going on. We started out by saying you can't take from the sukkah, but rather from what's samach to it, and then immediately Rashi says hashta mashma. Right after he mentioned that you can take from the samach, he says hashta mashma. So it's not clear which part he's talking about, but when I see him talking about mutter, I understand he's talking about the second part, where the Mishnah said you could take from the samach. And if we go with that approach, that's what Rashi meant a moment ago when he said what? Hashta mashma. Now it's understood that we're talking about what?
If it's thick.
The extra thickness. That's what samuch. That extra bit of thickness that's on top of the regular. So let's say you have a regular layer, which we would call the sukkah itself, according to this pshat in Rashi, which Rashi says the Gemora is understanding that now. And on top of that, there's an extra thickness, which is the samuch part. That would explain what samuch means. Let's say you have 3 feet, it's like when you have 3 feet of snow, 3 feet of right? The very bottom part has one halacha, and what's adjacent to that, meaning just above that, anything above that, will have a different halacha, perhaps. That's what Rashi's thinking. So that would explain what Rashi talks about. That we're talking about a very, very thick covering. So you could say part of it has one halacha and the other part has a different halacha. That's what he seems to be saying. That's how the Gemora is going to get around this problem. But what do you mean samuch to the? What's samuch? If it's a different dwelling, it's not really samuch, right? If you're talking about a different dwelling, it's not samuch. Anyhow, okay, so let's go back and understand Rosh again. Hashta mashman, at this point in the Gemora, it's understood, meaning the Gemora's havamina is that we're talking about imhu av, if this amount of whatever's on top of the sukkah was very thick, or maybe even the walls for all I know, but I assume he's talking about the schach, and that would be because Nasnu, they who made this edifice, they put kanim harbe. Put a huge amount of reeds.
What was thick, the sukkah?
Sounds like the actual schach. If he's talking about the walls, then that means to create the walls, he placed a lot of reeds. But
so sukkah over here is referring to a structure, right?
Sounds like it. That's what you originally said. Aren't you happy you were right?
Yeah. Because if we're talking about actual sukkah, why is the Mishnah over here?
Not only that, but Rashi says immediately that we're talking about Pesach and Etzeres.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's probably a good deal. Maybe how Rashi knew, and I'm sure that's how you knew as well. That what's it doing in Maseches Beitza? If it's talking about a real sukkah on Sukkos, should have been in Maseches Sukkah. Although you could claim that sometimes, that's the Yom Tov we're talking about. We're talking about how to deal with things on Sukkos. This is one of the Yomim Tovim. But it would be a bit strange to suddenly switch from regular Yom Tov to Sukkah all of a sudden. So Rashi says we're not. We're talking about regular Yom Tov. And what does a Sukkah mean here? A Sukkah-like structure. Where it also has a large, thick covering. And that's what we're talking about. The extra thickness. So according to that, if that's what it means, that the Mishnah would be telling you can't take from the bottom layer that would create the original sukkah edifice, but rather what's above it, just adjacent to it, the extra thickness of extra reeds that you had placed on top. Those you could take because they're not really necessary. Maybe. Or maybe because you only have to leave behind the minimum structure. As long as you leave behind the minimum structure, so whatever's above the minimum, you could take. Not clear. Something along those lines. That seems to be what Rashi's saying. Then it's mutter litol mehem, Rashi says. Mutter to take from those extra reeds that were placed to create the extra thickness.
So you ought to take anything that's not actually part of the structure.
Yeah, maybe it's a muksa question, as maybe you guys were implying, or maybe it's a binyan question. Maybe it's a question of what creates a binyan. Right? You're not allowed to just take apart structures on Yom Tov. Even if it's to create wood, even if it's for wood, for burning, you're not allowed to just take apart a building. Just like we're not allowed to pluck fruit off of trees, even though it's for eating. We're not allowed to do every malacha under the sun just for the sake of malachas ochel nefesh, right? Mm-hmm. So perhaps that's what's going on here. So maybe the minimum amount that creates the structure you're not allowed to take away from, then you're actually destroying the structure. What's above that, the extra, is not going to be destroying the structure. Maybe that's the pshat. Rashi hasn't really revealed that part of it. He just talked about what is the structure we're dealing with and what's this samuch thing. The samuch thing, Rashi makes it sound like that's going to be a bit of a question. The Gemora may start by supposing it's one thing and may end up supposing it's something else. Like we had yesterday, a similar idea about the wood that we said you can't pile up. We started talking about it as being perhaps not regular wood, but maybe something special. But we started by talking about it as being regular, and then we had to go away from that. Or the straw, we said maybe the straw isn't regular straw either. It's a special kind of straw. So either way, we've seen already a few cases where the Gemora starts thinking one thing, maybe the norm, and then goes away from that to explain the full Mishnah to what's called an ukimta. That's what's implied in Rashi, that we're going to end up getting an ukimta here, but we start out with the norm. The norm would be a regular structure. And what does the samuch mean? Doesn't mean some adjacent structure, it just means in the actual sukkah itself there's a part that's the...
That's ukimta, right? Hashtamashma is ukimta.
No, Hashtamashma is saying now it's understood what's called the Havamina. That's setting you up for the Havamina. Rashi's very often in the Mishnah will explain things according to the Havamina of the Gemora. The starting point of the discussion. To help you understand the Gemora's original assumption. And then will probably be shown in the Gemora how that's not really appropriate because it doesn't answer all the questions, and therefore we have to come up with an ukimta like we did yesterday. We said maybe he's talking about cedar wood or special straw with thorns, all those kind of extra cases to explain everything. In any event, we have to finish the Rashi first. Let's go on with the Rashi then. The
Gemora parich,
which means...
The Gemora will explain.
No, parich. Parich. You know what they did in... You know what they did in Egypt? They did avodas parich. That's the kind of work they did in Egypt. You know what kind of work they had to do in Egypt? Which is from this week's Parsha.
Back-breaking.
Back-breaking. So the word parich means to break. So the Gemora uses the word parich, and Rashi often uses it as like a stage direction, so to speak, to explain when you're trying to break something in terms of Gemora logic, it means asking a question, right? That's what ends up breaking the old mold and going on to something new is a question. Questions always lead to something new. So a question is called parich. As opposed to parish is to explain.
It's asking a question.
Rashi's explaining, the Gemora is going to be asking a question. Rashi tells you what that question is. What's the Gemora's question going to be?
Ha Sater. Halcha, is it?
Halal.
There.
What's an ohel? What's an ohel?
The tent.
Right, so ahala is just adding an aleph, as often happens in Aramaic. You add an aleph, but it's really the word that would be without the aleph. Like Abba is like Av, Ima is like Ain. Just add an aleph and it becomes an Aramaic word.
And Sater?
So that's actually like the English word destroy, same root as the English word destroy. Stira, right? Stira, if you look in the 39 malachas, that's, you know where the 39 malachas are listed in the Masechah Shabbos? It's easy to remember. In the 7th parak, because it's the 7th day. In the 7th parak of Masechah Shabbos, in the 2nd Mishnah, so the name of the parak is called Klal Gadol. And in the actual Masechta, if you're not just looking in the Mishnayos, but you want to look in the actual Masechta, but it's, right, because in every Masechta it has Mishnayos as well, it's on page Ayin Gimel, which is like the word Oneg Shabbos. You want to have Oneg, don't do Malacha. So all the 39 Malachas are listed there. It's good to go over it because even if you don't understand every single one that's listed in the Mishnah, at least it'll keep it in your mind that there's 39 different malachas on Shabbos that you have to be careful about. It's good to know what all those are. And there's also a very nice book that was put together by Baruch Chait, which goes through every malacha and shows you different versions of that malacha that come up every day in our day-to-day Shabbos experience. Anyhow, so one of the 39 malachas is what?
Seisel.
Every one of them starts with a hey. Ha choresh, ha boneh,
Hastir.
ha soter,
Soter.
the one who destroys. So it's the opposite of boneh, right? Many of the malachas go in pairs. Someone who writes, someone who erases, someone who builds, someone who destroys. They go very often in pairs. One of the reasons is because when they made the Mishkan, they not only built it, but they also made it in such a way as to destroy it. Because each time they had to take it down and move it to a new place, that's also part of the Mishkan.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the malacha, the real malacha, is soser almanas livnos. The real malacha on Shabbos is when you destroy, but it has to be on condition to build. Because if you're just destroying, it's a non-productive act. It's not going to be a malacha. A malacha has to be a productive act. So if you're destroying something in order to build it up, like many people come, they destroy a building in order to build on top of it, then it's a malacha. That's what they did in the Mishkan. They took down the Mishkan from one place and they rebuilt it in a new place.
It's called Soter. Taking apart.
So in the Gemora, they also sometimes ask what's called a stira, a contradiction. Because there also, by having one piece of information that seems to contradict another, you're creating some kind of a destructive, something's getting destroyed in that contradiction. Anyhow, okay, so the Gemara's question is, ha, behold, sasar, or satar, this person what? He destroyed
The structure.
oh, hello, right? A structure, right? Because we said we're not really talking about sukkah. How do I know we're not talking about sukkah, as Sruli said, because it's in Maseches Beitza, not in Maseches Sukkah. And that's how Rashi knew to tell us we're talking even on Pesach and Shavuos, lav davka sukkahs. And therefore, when it says sukkah, what it really means is a structure, as Sruli originally said. And Rashi is saying, what is a structure in halacha? It's called an ohel. Even though it may not be like what we call a tent that people, like the nomads use, which any kind of structure is called an ohel. So Rashi is saying the Gemara is going to claim that what? What is the Gemara's question then, according to Rashi? What is the Gemara's question according to Rashi? Wait, slow. I just want to know these three words. Ha satar ahalo.
The person who breaks the...
Ha, behold. Satar. What form of the verb is that?
Past tense.
Okay. So somebody did something. So let's translate that into this word. Satar.
The whole heap broke.
Or destroyed, right? Which has to do with the 39 malachas. He did the malacha of soser, of
breaking the structure.
Of the structure. Now, what's it talking about? Rashi's saying the Gemara is going to ask about what? About something we just said in the previous part of the Rashi. What did Rashi say just before this? What did Rashi just explain before this, Sruli?
The Kedai takes stuff from the summer, right?
He's explaining the seif of the Mishnah, which says you're allowed to take from the summer, correct. And the way Rashi said it... Wait, the way Rashi said it, what did it mean? What did it mean? Rashi explained what it means in the Havamina. Mashta mashma. There's an extra thickness, because he put on a lot of reeds. And that's what he's allowed to take from the extra thickness. But Rashi says that all sounds nice. It fits into the word samuch nicely, but the Gemara is going to ask a question about that. What? How can you say he's allowed to take away from that extra thickness?
That's just taking down structure.
It's still considered taking away structure. Now, if you remember what I said a few minutes ago, that maybe the pshat is the extra part is not called taking apart a structure, because I don't really need it for the essential structure. Maybe the very bottom layer I can't take, because that's taking from that I'm really taking away the essential structure. But Rashi says the Gemora is not going to buy that. The Gemora is going to look at it differently than what I said. The Gemora is going to ask a question. The Gemora is going to say, even that extra part, when you take from that extra part, we don't understand that either. Because that should also have been what? Asur, because of the malacha of soiser. That guy also, who's taken from the extra thickness, should also be called soiser. Should also be accused of doing a malacha on Yom Tov, which is not permissible. There's not a heter for doing stira for ochel nefesh. Okay? So Rashi's saying that's going to bother the Gemora. Maybe that's why Rashi said, Hashta mashma, the Gemora starts by thinking one thing. And the Gemora is going to have to alter that. Why is the Gemora going to have to alter it? Because there's a kasha. Right? That's why after a kasha we usually end up making nukimta, like we did yesterday. Okay? But Rashi says, what is that kasha that's going to move us to make the extra ukimta? Because the way we just explained it, that there's an extra thickness, the Gemara still has an opportunity to ask, that shouldn't be permitted either, because that should be asar mishum soiser. He's taking apart. Now Rashi has to explain. I said to you before, it's not really soiser because it's extra. Right? That's how I explained it to you a few minutes ago, trying to understand what Rashi was saying. But Rashi says the Gemara still looks at it as soiser. Why? It's extra. It's an extra thickness. So Rashi now explains that in the Gemara's kasha, it's assuming another thing. That what? The kivan, because since bat lei legabi schach. What does that mean?
And since you bittel to...
He did something. We're talking about a guy did something. Bat lei. He was mevatel it. What is mevatel?
Negated it.
Okay, but what does that mean in practicality?
He made it unusable.
Okay, but we're talking about it becoming part of the ohel. Remember? Rashi says the Gemara is going to claim that even the extra thickness, if I take away from that extra thickness, it's still called taking apart a house. And I said to you before, but I don't need that part. So why is it called taking apart the house? What is Rashi answering, Sruli?
Kevin, the butler since the extra part is bottle.
What's buttle?
The extra.
It got buttle. That's a Hebrew word. I need some kind of English word to get me to understand this.
Secondary. It's thoughtful. It's tough.
More than that. What are you doing when you're mevatel chametz, let's say, right before bittul chametz? What is that? Bittul.
Making non-existent.
No, that's not what you say. Ka'afra da'ara. It's like dirt, right?
Yeah.
But it's not nothing. It's something. It just doesn't have a lot of usage. But that, what am I doing if I take these reeds and I'm mevatel it legabe schach? The extra schach is buttle towards the other schach. What does that mean?
It's no longer part of the sukkah.
No, it is. It's buttle. Like you were saying before, tuffle. But it's more than just tuffle, it's buttle. Buttle means I want it to remain there. Okay? I'll give you an example. In Maseches Sukkah, it talks about a sukkah that's above 20 amas. You know what the halacha is if a sukkah is above 20 amas? Puzzle, right?
Yeah.
See, the sukkah, the Gemora says, but what if you take pillows and you're mevatel them at the bottom of the sukkah? Right? So that when you walk into the sukkah, you're walking on a bunch of pillows. Or like today, a lot thick carpet, thick mattress. What? Itztaba is another example. So what are you doing? Instead of the ground being way down here and the schach being above 20, now the ground is here. I've created a new thickness to the ground. But the Gemora says that's only true if it's something that I'm really going to be mavatal. What does that mean? I really want it to remain there all of Sukkot. To me, it's like this, the chametz. It's completely non-existent. I don't need it for myself. I'm going to just leave it there.
It's meaningless.
It's meaningless, but it's an extra. Because of that, I want it to remain there. That's the part I think Rashi's saying over here. That's what I think Rashi's saying about these extra coming. That he was mavatal, the extra thickness that we said, that we thought we were being allowed to take. But how can you take it? It's buttled to the other schach. So I have this much schach on top. This much I need for the actual structure. This other part I don't need, so therefore I was thinking you could take from that. But Rashi says no, the Gemora is going to ask that what? That even taking from that extra part should be considered to be destroying the ohel. Why? I don't need it. Because Rashi says you were mavatal it there. What does that mean? You wanted it to remain there. You made it part of the structure. Once you put it there and make it part of your structure, it's part of the structure. Just like the pillows or whatever, that if you really intend for them to be there the whole of Sukkot, then now it's not pillows, it's ground. Just like the chametz, you made it into dirt, just because you said to you it's not chashuv, what you really are saying, you want it to remain dirt.
Yeah.
So Rashi says the Gemara is going to be bothered. How can the Mishnah be letting you take the extra schach, but that extra is not really a separate entity? It's part of the whole edifice now. Now that you put it there and you want it to remain there, it's part of the structure. So how can anyone let you take from that? How can the Mishnah let you take from that?
Correct.
That should be as bad as the regular part. They're both a malacha of destroying. And what? Once that's true,
Kalpota, the shokol min anything that's bottled too as part of the sukkah.
no, I'm not talking here. We are talking about what's this extra part that's bottled. But once you have that extra that's bottled, now kol purta. What's a purta?
A little bit.
So kol purta, any little bit, the shakil minei,
You take from it.
that a person takes from that extra thickness, which is bottled to the whole thing. Now you take a tiny little bit even from that extra little bit, then what? It should be considered
stira.
stira. It should be as bad as taking down a regular structure, right? You know what it's like? These extra tiles here, right? You know these are just like glued onto the wall, right? These aren't like big thick pieces of marble. They're just little tiny pieces of slabs of marble that are glued onto the wall, right? So am I allowed to take one of them off of the wall on Shabbos?
No.
Why? It'll still be a nice building without it.
Because you're going to say it's supposed to any small amount.
Yes, but it's not part of the structure. It's an extra thing I just glued onto the outside of the wall.
You can't take it off unless you have a reason for doing something in addition to it later.
No, but Rashi's saying even if you have a good reason. Oh, you mean the malacha of steer is only if you want to build? Okay, that's midoraisa. We say it's only really building. It's only really destroying doraisa if you're going to build in that place. But apparently the Rabbanan still don't want you to do it, even if you don't intend to build in that place. So I'm asking a question. Why am I not allowed to take this slab of marble off on Shabbos?
You have no use for it, number one.
I do. I'm going to use it for a table. I'll use this for a table. Nice big slab of marble. Am I allowed to take it out on Shabbos according to this Rashi, what we just saw?
No.
No. Why? Because when I put it there, what was my intention?
It should stay there.
It should stay there. Now I wanted to make it part of the wall. It really wasn't part of the wall, but now that I put it there and I've been mavatal it to be there, I want to make it part of that wall. So as soon as I do that, it is part of the wall now. So if I want to come and take it off, I'm taking off something that's extra, it's true, it's not really necessary for the building. Building will still stand without it, but I can't do that because it's been I was mevatel that tile, that marble to the wall. Now it's part of the wall. Taking down even part of that will be stira, will be a malacha of soiser. So Rashi says that's going to bother the Gemora. If the shot in the Mishnah is that the first part that says asur is the minimal part that creates the structure, and the second part that says you're allowed to take from what samach is the extras part, the extra thickness, that all sounds well and good, but when you start to think about it, it doesn't make sense, because that extra part is also, he was mavatal it to be there. Once he's mavatal to be there, it's part of the structure. Now you take away even a tiny little bit, it's going to be the malacha of soiser.
Mavatal means you don't want part of there, right?
Mavatal means you leave it there. It's like what you do before Pesach. You're saying, I don't want this bread.
Yeah.
Do I want this bread? No, I don't want it. I let it stay on the ground forever and ever. To me, it's just a bunch of dirt. That's one way of being mavatal. Another way of being mavatal, as I said to you before, there are other things like pillows. You want to be mavatal them to the ground to create a smaller sukkah. Now, when you walk in that sukkah, you say, it's not a sukkah above 20, because I measured from the top of the pillows all the way to the schach, it's only 19 amas now. I'm fine. Someone will say, no, they're not part of the ground. You still have to measure from the ground. I say, yes, these pillows are not part of the ground. Someone says, no, they're pillows, they're not ground. I say, no, I have no desire for these pillows. To me, they're like ground. I've been mavatal them to be there. That's what the Gemora says. It only works if you have really das to be mavatal it there all 7 days of Sukkot. Then it's really part of the ground. Then you can measure from the top of the pillow and say it's only 19. Same thing over here. He took all those reeds and he just kept piling them on. What was his intention when he piled them on? He wants them to remain there. But now he wanted a nice thick roof. Every little bit he added to create that thicker and thicker and thicker roof. True, it didn't need to be there originally, but now that he put it there and his intention was to leave it there, that's really what he's saying.
Have some coke on me. What? Oh.
So much in so few lines. Wow. Amazing.
Rashi makes it exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Rashi knew how to do that. He knew the secret to making things exciting.
I don't know these concepts. I haven't heard of these concepts before.
Well, when we originally learned Beitza back in Hillel, we learned Beitza, then Shabbos, then Sukkah, and then Erevin. In a way, that's smart just because you're learning a shorter Masechta. Beitza is considered a shorter Masechta. It's only 40 blot. And Shabbos is like 180 or whatever. So it's much longer. And then you go back to a shorter one. Sukkah is also only about 60. And then you go to Erevin, which is a much longer, much harder one. So it's like you're building up and going sort of like harder and then easier and harder and then easier. But conceptually also, they sort of lend to each other. Beitza has a lot of concepts that make it almost like an introduction to Masechah Shabbos. A lot of the malachas are already discussed here that will be incorporated in Masechah Shabbos. And a lot of the muksa questions that come up here are dealt with in Shabbos as well. So they really do. And Erevin is more like the structures and so forth that you end up learning about mechitzos and walls and different things that are mentioned in Sukkot. A lot of the concepts are mentioned in Sukkot, so they lend to each other.
A lot of math in Erevin.
A lot of what?
Mathematics.
There is a lot, yeah, there is a lot, but the truth is a lot of it's just imagining in your mind the diagrams of how everything's laid out. So there are people who actually have written books that have diagrams which help out. What I wanted to mention though is that these concepts, it's very kedai to see that Mishnah in Shabbos, which talks about the 39 malachas, not only because every 7 days we have Shabbos and one has to be familiar with these 39 malachas, or it's almost impossible to keep Shabbos. But also to understand what we're learning, which off and on we're introduced to concepts which are malachas, and because many people aren't familiar with the malachas properly, these tend to be difficult unless you've been exposed to them. So now, Baruch Hashem, now we've had a little bit more exposure to this idea of building and taking apart. Hopefully we'll get a little bit more as we go through the Gemora. Okay, thank you, Rashi. Let's start the Gemora.
Even though you're taking from the schach, it's still part of the seiseh.
That's what Rashi's saying. So therefore, the Gemora is going to ask a question because the Mishnah said it was mutter, but the Gemora is going to say it doesn't make sense. Why should that be mutter? It should be as forbidden as the regular part. So obviously, we're going to have to reorganize our way of thinking so that,
Why
again,
do they use the word samach for the skach on top of skach? Samach means more like next to it, doesn't it?
well,
You know,
it doesn't have to be
adjacent.
laterally. It could be,
Adjacent.
yeah, but if you think of, if most people have this much schach on top of their sukkah, then but what's above that is what's adjacent to the regular schach. And because Rashi says that that's what we're thinking now, besides the fact that we know that's going to change, which we have to just sort of wait in suspense until the Gemara gives us another way of looking at it. But what's interesting is that usually what this is called a havamina, usually the first way of the Gemara understanding something is the simplest way. So seemingly that is the simplest way to understand these words. You have the sukkah, the wood of the sukkah, and then what's adjacent to it. So Rashi says, seemingly, what we're talking about different parts of that large layer of schach. That seems to be the simplest way, but not the only way, because it's clear that we're going to have to change something to understand this better. Okay. And the Gemara right away gets into Rashi's question. So at least Rashi's prepared us adequately for the first line of Gemara. Okay, who's reading the Gemara?
Me. Mashna min sukkah, like the car. What's the difference from the structure? The loy, the car seise, halam min sabuk la. The loy, the car seise bahala.
Okay, now
This is not the loy, the car.
these kind of Gemaras, they're a little bit confusing. Okay, you have to remember one thing. We already, first of all, know what Rashi's saying. I'm sorry, we know what the Gemara is saying because we've seen Rashi. So let's not forget Rashi. We've been prepared by Rashi, right? It's like someone prepared you for a job and then you forget everything. That's not good, is it?
No.
Rashi did a lot of work to prepare us for this line of Gemara. So let's not forget everything.
We
we
should
see.
go into the collecting instead of forgetting the collecting.
So this is a good thing to remember, that sometimes when we see something new, we're like, oh my gosh, and we don't realize we've been prepared adequately if we just remember all the things we've learned in our preparation. So in this case, Rashi already prepared us for this line of Gemara. He already said to us what we're going to be encountering. We're now encountering it. Maybe we didn't know we were going to encounter it right away. But Rashi already told us. So before we see the Gemara, let's just say over again. Rashi already told me what the Gemara is going to ask. What's the Gemara going to ask?
What is the difference from a structure?
No, you're not trying to work it into the Gemara. I told you, forget about the Gemara, go back to Rashi and the Mishnah. Rashi and the Mishnah already prepared you. Now don't forget that Rashi. He spent a lot of time, and we spent a lot of time with Rashi understanding what the Gemara is going to ask.
How can the Mishnah say you're allowed to take from
From what?
a sukkah?
From, no, the Gemara doesn't say from the Sukkah. The Mishnah says from what's samach to it.
Summer, how can you, if it's going to be, if it's a problem of seiseh?
Okay, so let's remember that. The Gemara is going to ask, how can you take from that extra layer? It's also a problem of seiser. And Rashi explained why. Okay? So, now according to Rashi, let's just go back again to the Rashi. The Mishnah was saying two things. What was the Mishnah saying?
You're not allowed to take wood from a structure.
From what? Now that we know the whole Rashi, we know what it's really saying, according to the Faerman of the Gemora. What's it really saying, according to Rashi?
Yom Tov or Shavuos.
Yeah, forget about that part. The structure. What are we telling you about the structure? Don't use the word structure. Use what we've understood based on the Rashi.
In a garden or an orchard.
Okay, but that's irrelevant to what we're now saying. The part you're allowed to take and the part you're not allowed to take.
The part I take is from the extra.
And the part you're not allowed to take?
From the actual sukkah.
What does that mean from the actual sukkah?
From the roof itself, from the covering.
There's an extra thick covering. That extra thick covering, okay? Let's say it's like this, okay? Let's do it like that, okay? So what is it saying? This is the extra thick covering. What part am I allowed to take? What part am I not allowed to take, according to Rashi?
This part you're allowed to take.
Yeah?
This part not allowed.
Okay, so the very bottom layer,
Not allowed.
not allowed. The topmost part,
You are allowed.
are allowed. Okay? Now, Rashi already explained to us that the Gemora is going to ask that what?
What's the difference between the bottom and the...
The Gemora is going to ask
What is the difference about the top of the upper layer? If it's
that this should also be
awesome.
usher because it's also a problem of soiser, because it's batel to this. You can't look at them as two separate parts. That's what Rashi's saying. Because he was mevatel it to be there, it's no longer a separate little section that you can talk about as being mutter. That's what the Gemora's question is going to be. So, in the Havamina, we thought, okay, it's two separate sections. This part and this part. The Mishnah is saying, this part you can't take from, the little red layer at the bottom, and this part, the higher part, you can take from. But the Gemora is going to end up saying, no, this is also difficult to understand, but now the Gemora is saying it is a Mai Shana. Okay?
What is the difference?
So Mai Shana means I have two things. The Mishnah said about them two different halachas, and now we're questioning that. Okay? So think about that. When we say Mai Shana, what we're really saying is, what's the difference between this that you said what?
That is not allowed.
That you can't take, and this that you said that you are allowed. Okay? Now go back and read the Mai Shana with that in mind.
Masham in a sukkah. What is the difference from the lower part of the
Where the Mishnah said what?
that you're not allowed to
Below, that you can't take,
because
and the reason ostensibly is what? Which Rashi already used those words, so I already know exactly what they mean. That he's taking apart a structure which is a malacha. Oh, what's the difference between that and this part that you told me in the Mishnah? Yes, but I don't understand. Because Kasaser
also taking apart a structure.
is also taking apart a structure when he does that. And Rashi already explained to me why. Why am I saying it's also called taking apart a structure? Because you know how this layer came about?
Because of the bottom layer.
He was mevatel it to be there. He wants it to be there. How long? Forever. Forever. That's what bittul does. I want this to become part of that. This is no longer a separate thing. It's batel. Batel means I want it to be there. Like the pillows during all 7 days of Sukkot.
Example, taking a haystack in South Africa, you know, these roofs are made out of hay.
Okay.
So you can't
So that would be this kind of situation. That would be this kind of situation. Okay.
And donkeys.
What they called?
So according to Rashi, before this Gemora asked the question, we thought maybe that's the pshat in the Mishnah. There's a big thick layer. The top part is not really necessary, therefore, or maybe like, in a way, maybe it's a little bit like what Shabbatai was saying earlier. That maybe we thought the top part, he's going to come and take later, like Otzer. He's going to hopes to come later. Why is it so thick? He just put it all up there. right? To keep it up there for a long time. He's still hoping to come back and get it. That would mean it's not batul. The thought of coming to get it, it's like the pillows on Sukkot. If I'm going to come and take those pillows away the second or third day of Sukkot, can I consider it to be part of the ground? And when I measure the height of the sukkah, I'll measure from the top of the sukkah of the pillows? Or do I say, no, the pillows are just sitting on top of the ground. Don't include them in your calculation. So you know what the Gemora says? It depends how long you intend to leave the pillows there. If you intend them to leave them there forever, which in terms of sukkah means what? All 7 days, then you're right. You can consider them part of the ground, because now they're not moving. They're going to be part of that ground for all 7 days. But if you intend to come and take it, then it's not part of the ground. It's a pillow that happens to be on the ground. Same thing here. Maybe the Gemora originally thought that we're talking like Shabbatai, that he's going to come and take those. The Gemara says that's not true. This guy intended to make a large structure, right? He wants it to be there. He's mavatal it there, Rashi said in the Mishnah. Then it means he's not coming to take it. He's leaving it there. It's like the pillows, leaving it there for all the sukkahs. Here, if he intends to leave those pieces of wood there, this top layer, then it should be as much part of the structure as anything else. So that's when the Gemara could ask, what's the difference? Why should you allow him to take this and not this?
The difference is same malacha, right?
Should be the same problem, same malacha. So now the Gemara answers, no, like Rashi implied in the Mishnah, that's what we thought in the Havamina, that's what hashta mashma. But in the end, we're going to end up saying something else. So now, who comes to the rescue? Yeah. Who's reading the Gemora? See, this is interesting. There's no Rashi in the Gemora's question. You know why? Because he already did all the work in the Mishnah. He already did all that explaining in the Mishnah, which got me ready for that. So he doesn't need to explain anything here.
Rashi doesn't waste words, eh?
Right, Rashi did his work in advance.
So
Then he went off and he played a round of golf there. Right? Because he'd already done all his work there.
Rashi, a golf player.
Now we're going to have a new thing, because Rashi's going to have to explain the new answer.
Did Rashi know what golf was?
I don't know, but he was a winemaker, so that explains a lot. Okay, now, Amar Rav Yud Amar Shmuel, who's reading the Gemora.
Samuch, Ledafunot.
Defanot.
The walls.
Right. Not what you thought in the Havamina, like Rashi said, it's only hashta mashma, that we're talking about an extra thick layer of schach. No. You know what samach means? It doesn't mean samach to the bottom layer of schach, it means samach to the defanos. A whole different kind of samach. And how does that explain anything? We have to try to think of how that explains anything. But anyhow, let's see Rashi.
Now, isn't it also betel to the walls of the snakes?
That would be a good question. Then now you're asking an excellent question. Now that you've been educated to this whole idea of bittul, so now you're going to have to say, well, how did that change anything? Who cares if it's up here or down here? It still should be a problem of bittul. But maybe we'll say no. Up there, you intend to leave it forever. Down here, if it's down by the bottom of the wall, maybe you intend to take it. I don't know. Let's see how Rashi builds up the kasha.
Samach ledefanos means it's close to the walls.
Mm-hmm.
Kanim has a kufim.
Niz kafim.
Niz kafim.
So Rashi's adding something that the Gemara didn't say. These are kanim that are niz kafim. You know what niz kafim means?
Straight.
Like the word zokef kifufim. Zokef.
Straight in the bed.
Is standing up straight, not just straight. Straight is yashar. Zakuf implies standing up. So kef kifufim means he takes things that are bent over, but in the sense of like towards the ground, and helps us stand up straight, standing up. Koma zakufa, that's what makes human beings different than the animals. We go with koma zakufa. We're standing erect. Homo erectus.
Is that where the word kuf comes from?
We're what?
Monkey.
A kof?
The only
It's
animals.
It's a different. No, it's a different. That's with a kuf.
Ah, kuf.
They actually say that the letter kuf looks like a monkey.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So Rashi's saying these are not cunning that are like horizontal on the top of the sukkah. These are kanim that are zakufim, that are standing up straight. Svivos lidafanos. Surrounding the walls, right? I don't know exactly why he has to describe it that way, but I definitely get a feeling like they're like leaning up against the sukkah or something like that. But maybe that shows you that they're transient. If they're on top, that they're just lying vertically, and they don't really, they could stay there forever. So that would imply that you left them forever. That's the bittul that Rashi talked about. But now that they're standing up next to the sukkah, maybe that's clear that they're not going to remain there forever. Okay. Rashi says, and about that now we can say what? Kivan ne'ergu. Interesting verb that Rashi uses there.
Weave.
Yeah, that's the real verb, but this is the passive form. Woven. They were not woven. Now, the idea of weaving, right? My mother actually used to weave things, and the Gemora actually in Sukkot, and again in Shabbos, talks a lot about the malacha of weaving. You know what weaving is? What actual weaving is? The warp and the woof. Okay, so how do you weave cloth? You have hundreds of strands of cloth that are going this way, and through them you weave another piece of cloth. In other words, I have, let's say, 100 strings going this way, and every other string is attached to either the top or the bottom. So when I press down, let's say 1, 3, and 5, 1, 3, and 5 go up, right? Okay, and 2 and 4 and 6 go down, which creates like a tunnel. And that's what you throw. You throw this thing through them, like it's I forget what you call it. All the wool is attached to that, like a spool of wool goes through there. So now between every other one, I have this thing going like that. That's what creates durability to cloth. And it's not just many strings that are like next to each other, but they're woven like that. And then the next time you throw it this way, I just threw it this way. I want to throw it this way, I reverse everything. Instead of 1, 3, and 5 going up, they're going to go down now. And the 2, 4, and 6 are going to go up. So when it goes back this way, that's what gives it that effect of going up and down. Every single thread is like now up, down, up, down. Basically it's like a braid. You know, a braid is so thick and sturdy because they're all like intertwined with each other. That's what you're doing. You create this cloth that's woven. You're taking every single strand that's going this way, and it's going up and down, up and down, up and down, so that every single strand is so tough because it's completely braided with the other. Okay? That's how it's set up. That's how a loom is set up, a weaver's loom. Okay? So Rashi's applying that to the walls of the sukkah. What would it be if I wove these reeds into the wall? I would take the reed and I would do the same thing, right? I would put it up and down, up and down, up and down to make it a stronger structure. So Rashi's saying, but these reeds that are just adjacent to the sukkah, they're not woven in. And I know because of that an important fact. The fact that you chose not to weave them into the sukkah, basically you chose not to build them into the sukkah. Now Rashi takes that thing that he mentioned in the Mishnah, which made a problem of stira, and this is going to allow me to call it not stira, because now I have a reason to believe that this was not batal to be there. So that's why Rashi included that in the Mishnah, so you can know this is the factor that's going to change. Because of now, if I'm talking about a different way that they're sort of next to the sukkah, you could be next to the sukkah up here and you say that's batal. Next to the sukkah here, you say it's not batal. Why? Because over here they're going to remain there forever unless you happen to come take them. But over here, you dafka made it different than the wall. That's an indication that lo batle l'gabi dolphin.
They're not bottom.
Therefore, Eino Domer
In a dome, the summer.
L'samach l'schach. Therefore, this samach is not like the previous case of samach. Previous case of samach, we're talking about all the reeds that are just lying like this. There's like 100 reeds that are just lying like this. Ones that are up here, ones that are down here, but they're all the same. They're all part of that layer. There's no difference between the ones up here and the ones down here, really. They're all the same structure. But over here, the ones that are next to the schach are different intrinsically from the walls. That's why we can talk about this as being different. Okay? Shehaschach.
Shasach eina arog.
Because the way you lay schach on top of a structure, it's not woven anyways. It's not built in a way that's woven, it's just laid on top. All the schach is like that. So therefore, this is the same as this. They're all just laid on top. So therefore, if I say down here is called part of the sukkah, so up here is also part of the sukkah. They're all the same. But over here,
Eina kol shava, fichach kol shava, all equal.
now he's going back to the schach. On the schach, where they're all lying horizontally, one on top of the other, they're all shavet. They're all equal. There's nothing that's more woven in than the other. Ha'elyon kitachton. The top part of that layer is the same as the bottom part of that layer. Right? Because it's all schach hu. It's all part of a large layer of schach. Whereas now, the way that Shmuel is reviewed on Shmuel is saying, now we're talking about two completely different things. The wall, and next to the wall are reeds that are standing up next to the wall. But those reeds that are standing up next to it are so different from the wall, you don't consider it part of the wall. If I take away those reeds now, I'm not taking away from the wall whatsoever. Because the wall is like a woven thing, as Rashi said. It's like right? That's how you build a wall. You build a wall by making things that are permanent structure that's going to stand. So any reed that's now just standing up next to it is intrinsically different. So it's not batel to it anymore. It's not the same idea. You can't say this is batel anymore. So that's why Rashi's saying, the Gemora is explaining how this can now fit very well into the Mishnah. The sukkah itself, you can't take away anything. Why? Because your sois are oil. But what the reeds that are right next to the wall, you can't take away. Why? They're not part of the oil.
And that's still called smuch?
Yeah, this is going to be called samach, right? Mm-hmm. It's like these chairs are next to the wall. Mm-hmm. Okay? Even if they're leaning up against the wall, it doesn't matter. They're intrinsically different. And Rashi said the main difference is you're not intending to leave them there forever. They're not batel to the thing, to the structure. So therefore, if they're not batel to the structure, they just happen to be physically next to it. So physically next to it doesn't make it part of the structure. But at the layer on top, then we talked about all those reeds that are next to the bottom layer are still called the same layer. They're all part of the same layer. They're all part of the structure. Okay, so that's the first answer in the Gemora.
So just by reading the Mishnah at this point, we say you're not allowed to take wood from the sukkah, ele minas samuchla. Okay.
Right.
So
now we're understanding it differently.
To the walls side.
Right.
But you would never know that from this, right? At this point.
Well, we would be wondering what part. I mean, even when we all learned the Mishnah, we were like trying to struggle with what's samach, right? What's the samach? Until we saw the Rashi, we saw that's one way of learning samach, and there could be a different way. But Rashi assured us that there was the first way of looking at it, and then there's going to be another way of looking at it. We know there's different ways of looking at it, but we had to find one shot that makes both statements make sense. Once you describe the sukkah and something samach to it, you have to now explain why one is mutter and one is asur. So this new way of explaining it, it certainly fits into the words, maybe not as good apparently as the first way, but at least it does accomplish the other part, which is to explain why one has one halach and the other has the other halach. So we've definitely gotten out of the problem, according to, unless the Gemara is going to ask a question now, but so far so good. Okay. Rav Menashe Amar
Rav Menashe say, אפילו תלמה בשאין סמוך לרפונית
Tefanos.
So he said that even if you say that you might say,
That you would say, even if you try to say, in other words, that it's be talking in a case,
not next to the walls,
meaning rather like we thought in the Havamina, like we thought originally.
right? The wall, the roof.
That's like all part of the roof.
Yeah.
So he's saying even then we could say that the Mishnah makes sense. Before we thought that doesn't make any sense. Why would you be allowed to take from the bottom layer, not from the top? I'm sorry, from the top layer, not from the bottom layer. So now according to
Even that doesn't make sense. You can take it apart.
what?
Menashe.
No, Rav Menashe is saying even if you say that it is talking about this, right? Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel said no, this is not what we're talking about. Talking about this, right? This is the wall, and this is standing in proximity next to the wall. That's why this is not part of the sukkah, and this is part of the sukkah. So this you can take, this you can't take. Rav Menashe is saying no. Even if we go back to the original shot, even if you don't say that new shot, you stay with the original shot, which apparently was better in the words. We could still explain why this is mutter and this is usher. So he's now taking the bull by the horns. How can it be? Because you could say that what?
Tanai.
Kitanya. When? It's like a rhetorical question. When did we learn hahi, that? When did we learn that? Now what do you think he's referring to? The original thing that was bothering us is what? How can you take from the top layer?
Top layer.
It's part of the whole structure. He's movatel it there. But he says no. Because I could say it's still talking about this, but why? Because ki tanya hahi, when we learned that, what do you think he's referring to? The part that was bothering us. What part was bothering us? How can you take from the top layer? And he says, I'll explain that. Because ki tanya hahi, when we were learning that, and what's the that? That the top layer is mutter. You were bothered by. Why should that be mutter? He was mevatel it there. He's saying, no, don't worry about that. Because when we learned that you could take from the top layer, you know why you could take from there? Because we're talking about a special case. It's like before we said the cedar, right? Cedar wood. It's not regular wood, cedar wood. Or it's not regular straw, it's a special kind of straw. He's saying over here, no, you could be talking about taking from the top layer of the schach, but you know why it's mutter? Because ki tanya hahi, when we learned that part that said you're allowed to take from the top layer, it was a special kind. It was what? Be, in a case of isuraisa. A thing called isuraisa, which is an ukimta, meaning it's not normal reeds like we thought. It's a special kind of reeds. Now, think of the word asur. Matir asuri. You know what that means? We make a bracha every morning.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hashem, that you what?
Release the bounds.
So isur can also mean...
Temporary.
No, you just said it.
Asur, to release.
Why did you just... No. Matir asurim. Think what you're saying.
Yeah. To release the bound.
So what does asur mean?
It's bound up.
So isuraisa,
It bound. These are reeds that are bound in. Yeah.
which is really like you, what? No, like you were saying originally. When you put away schach and you store it away, but you really intend to come and take it away, what do? Do you just throw it up there, a bunch of reeds? No. You bundle it up.
So also it's bundled up.
That's right. Which is exactly what Shabbatai was saying in Matir Asurim. Just he didn't believe himself. kept saying, can't be what I just said.
That's in prison.
First you said it, and then you said it can't be that. Then you said it again, and it can't be that again. No, this is what this word means. It's Uraisa. Means bundles of twigs or bundles of reeds in this case. So that means, and the Gemora actually in Sukkot talks about a case like that, where he came and he put bundles on top of the sukkah.
Yeah.
Not at the time of Sukkot, just to store the reeds there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Gemara says, could those be good schach when Sukkah comes? The Gemara had a whole shiloh if those could be good schach. Because he had no kavanah to put it there for schach. But the only one who really requires kavanah for schach is what? Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says you don't have to have kavanah for schach. You can have kavanah for shade. But then the Gemara gets into a whole question. What if you untie the bundle? Blah, blah, blah. Okay? But this is what the Gemara is saying over here. That's a normal thing. To come and store the bundles, which is really what you were saying originally. Right? You should be very gratified. This is your first shot. And he was storing it up there as like an otzer. Now you can ask your other question. See, when you said that, you were remembering the previous sugya, where otzer made it muksa according to Rabbi Yehuda. So we'd have to say this is going like Rabbi Shimon then. That otzer doesn't make a problem for him. Okay, you'll think about that.
I'm sticking around now. I don't have a clean job anymore. I'm sticking around.
Okay.
What's good news then?
So you want to stay in the room? Is that what you're saying?
It's
or-
the girl in the basement upstairs.
Oh, okay.
We're married in Salem.
Okay.
Central Six City.
Very good.
From now on. So.
Tricky.
Review everything, and
Tricky stuff, this.
this is yours, I think, right?
Yeah. I don't have the job anymore. I need
Okay. Well, just remember that
Got your file?
the truth is, collecting can be done any time of the day, not just only at lunchtime. So just remember that you don't have to do it. I'm just saying there's always a possibility that if you don't have something to do, you can always go to a neighbor and collect.
You even did a 5:30?
Yep, and plenty of people do it. Not saying you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying
So how does all